Welcome to the Geek Homeworld. I am your host, SavageTechman. We talk sci-fi, TV, movies, superheroes, and all from a geek perspective. You can find us on Blogger, Google+, Twitter, Facebook. We're everywhere. Join the Geek Homeworld.
Hello everyone, this is First Officer Cheryl taking over the con for Captain Ed because he is on an away mission. In other words, he's working weird schedules again. He will be on this podcast later in the episode, but I wanted to go ahead and take the opportunity to have a little celebration because one of my favorite actors would have been 95 last week on November the 25th, and that is Ricardo Montalban, who is fantastic in his role of the ultimate villain in Star Trek, in my opinion, which is Khan. Now, of course, Benedict Cumberbatch revived that role in the new Star Trek series. So in thinking about Ricardo Montalban's career, I really thought about exploring Star Trek villains in general, but the more that I read about him, I was inspired to talk about Latinos in the film industry instead, because he was incredibly active as an advocate. He started acting back in 1941, and he was cast oftentimes in Latino roles. He was cast as an Italian, as Frenchman, as an Indian, and even sometimes as a Japanese person. So he was incredibly sensitive to the way that Mexicans in particular, because he was Mexican, the way that they were portrayed in films. And so he became very active on their behalf. And in 1970, he and some friends formed a foundation called Nosotros, which means we, in order to help highlight Latino actors. And they started the Golden Eagle Awards and also the Nosotros American Latino Film Festival. And shortly after that, he and some others formed the Ethnic Minority Committee of the Screen Actors Guild. And again, they were advocating both for better portrayals and for better roles for Latinos and other minorities. Then, towards the end of his career in 1999, he and some friends bought a little theater that had belonged to UCLA, and they refreshed it and renamed it the Ricardo Montalban Theater. And it now focuses particularly on Hispanic community, works performed by Hispanic artists, but also other young people now are being featured there too. So I thought we'd take a look at the people that he helped lay the foundation for, help open doors for. And before I do that, though, I want to have a note about just the word Latino, because it can mean a lot of different things and encompass a lot of different people. It's an extremely diverse group, and technically it means anyone who is descended from Spanish-speaking or even Portuguese-speaking ancestors. And then the term Hispanic means just Spanish-speaking heritage. So in the film industry, we're really talking about anyone with any kind of Hispanic background, Latino background in their ancestry. And so that can mean a lot of people, because North America and South America in particular has a lot of mixing. All of us really come from a variety of backgrounds. And so there are a number of Latino artists who wouldn't even necessarily consider themselves Latino. They don't speak Spanish. They weren't raised in neighborhoods where that was predominantly the culture. So, for instance, Jessica Alba, who has even gone on record complaining about the fact that people have pegged her as Latino because of her name and potentially also because of the way that she looks. And she's sort of justified, because she went on the genealogy series Finding Your Roots, and they discovered that her father's side, the name Alba, is actually Mayan, so Native American descent. So nevertheless, she is incredibly important in the geek world because she, of course, played the lead role in the television series Dark Angel, and she was in the film Sin City, and more recently played the Invisible Woman in the 2005 Fantastic Four and its sequel. Before I talk about any more actors, though, I do want to mention that we have sort of a quartet of Latino directors who are making a lot of geek-friendly films, if you will. Robert Rodriguez being one, with the film El Mariachi and its sequels Desperado and Once Upon a Time in Mexico. He also directed Sin City, which of course was adapted from the graphic novel of the same name, and its sequel SimCity, A Dame to Kill For. On the more fun side, he did the Spy Kids films, and then he also did the film Machete, which featured a lot of Latino actors, people like Jessica Alba and also Danny Trejo, Michelle Rodriguez, Cheech Marin, Nina Leon. I mean, the list just goes on and on for that cast. Another director is Guillermo del Toro, who is known for Blade 2, Hellboy, and Hellboy 2. He actually was offered the directing position for the Hobbit films, but because of production problems, he left the project, although he was still credited as a co-writer. And then more recently, he did the 2013 film Pacific Rim, which I did not see, but which Ed definitely enjoyed. And then there is Alfonso Cuarón, who is known for directing one of the Harry Potter films, The Prisoner of Azkaban, as well as the sci-fi thrillers Children of Men and Gravity. And it's because of Gravity that he earned the Oscar for directing, and he was the first Latino to earn that Oscar. He's had several nominations, in fact, I think 6, but he was the first Latino to earn the directing Oscar. And then finally in this quartet is the director Brett Ratner, and he is known for Red Dragon, notoriously perhaps for X-Men The Last Stand. He produces a lot. He did the really funny films Horrible Bosses and Horrible Bosses 2. Now, in addition to Ricardo Montalban, there have been many other actors who have been great advocates for their community. And one of these in particular is Edward James Olmos. He's been involved in quite a bit of social activism. And in fact, during the 1992 riots in Los Angeles, he actually went out into the streets and helped to clean up the damage and helped to rebuild the community. He later co-founded the Los Angeles Latino International Film Festival, as well as the nonprofit organization Latino Literacy, which has produced Latino book festivals all over the country, and Latino Public Broadcasting, which he currently is chairing. In his career, he's had a lot of roles that give him great geek credibility. In fact, before Star Trek cast Patrick Stewart for Next Generation, he was contacted to perhaps play the captain on that series. And then last season, he came in for 5 episodes of The Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as Robert Gonzalez. And really, probably his most memorable geek role was on Battlestar Galactica as William Adama. And actually, he married Latino actress Lamari Nadal, who co-starred with him on Battlestar Galactica as Gianna O'Neill. And his real-life son, Bodie James Olmos, was on the show as Lieutenant Junior Grade Brendan Hot Dog Costanza. Another multi-generational acting family includes Clifton Collins Jr., who is sometimes credited as Clifton Gonzalez Gonzalez in honor of his grandfather, Pedro Gonzalez Gonzalez, who was in a number of James Bond films. Clifton played the part of Aiel in the 2009 Star Trek reboot as the second-in-command to the villain Nero, and he also appeared as Ops Tendo Choi in Pacific Rim. And he had an uncredited role as the vegan police in one of Ed's favorite films, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Gamers will recognize him as the voice of Cesar in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. And while we're on that subject, I want to mention that Danny Trejo lent his voice talents to Grand Theft Auto Vice City, to Fallout New Vegas, and also to Call of Duty Black Ops. Another young actor is Alejandro Meraz, also known as Alex, who played the werewolf on the film New Moon, and he's cast in the upcoming 2016 release Suicide Squad alongside Will Smith and Ben Affleck, Common, and Jay Hernandez, who plays the role of Diablo in that film. I know a lot of people are looking forward to Suicide Squad. Another really big actor who's had a couple of cool spots in the geek world, particularly the Marvel Universe, is Benicio del Toro, who played the Collector in Thor the Dark World and again in Guardians of the Galaxy. He is going to be reprising that role for the next Guardians of the Galaxy film. And he also is set to appear as the main villain in Star Wars 8, which should be coming out in 2017. Speaking of Star Wars, I normally wouldn't mention someone with really just one geeky role, but I couldn't possibly leave out Princess Leia's adopted dad, Senator Organa, who was played by Jimmy Smits, appearing in Star Wars episodes 2 and 3. On the female side, we have Rosario Dawson, who appeared in Men in Black 2, Sin City, Eagle Eye, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief. And she also voiced the character of Artemis in the animated film, which went direct to video, Wonder Woman. Which reminds me to tell you that TV's original Wonder Woman, Linda Carter, is also of Hispanic descent. Former child star Edward Walter Furlong actually won Saturn and MTV Movie Awards for his big role as John Connor in Terminator 2 Judgment Day. 2 decades later, he was in Green Hornet, which also featured Latina Cameron Diaz. And most recently, he performed in the crowd-funded pilot for Star Trek Renegades with cast members from several of the earlier Star Trek series. So it'll be interesting to see what's going to come of that one. Andy Garcia, who is known for films like The Godfather and The Untouchables, Internal Affairs, and When a Man Loves a Woman. But he also appeared in Ocean 11, 12, and 13. But he's got some really geeky roles coming up in next year, I believe. Both of these films are coming out, Geostorm and Max Steel. In addition to that, he is going to be playing the mayor of New York in the new Ghostbusters film, which I hope it's going to be a lot of fun and really fantastic, but we shall see. Another actor is Kevin Michael Alejandro, who is known as Jesus Velasquez in the show True Blood, which Ed was also a huge fan of, and as Sebastian Blood in the current CW series Arrow. Its crossover show, The Flash, also has a Latino in a key role, and that's Carlos Valdez, who plays Cisco. Then one of my favorites, who's not in Star Trek, because most of my favorites are in Star Trek, Michael Pena, who I thought was hilarious in Marvel's Ant-Man. But he also was in Battle Los Angeles and in this year's hit, The Martian, as well as Brad Pitt's war movie Fury. I'm excited because he is reprising Eric Estrada's role as Officer Poncherello in a big screen version of the 1970s, 1980s television show Chips, which began principal photography at the end of October. And so I don't think that a release date's been announced for that. 2016 is a possibility, but probably 2017 is more likely. Then coming back to my favorite franchise, Star Trek, I have to mention my favorite number 2, second in command, Robert Beltran as Chakotay. Well, that's not fair. I really like all of the seconds in command, but for now, I'm going to say my favorite is Robert Beltran. He was Chakotay, and I thought he was wonderful, even though he was actually playing a Native American character on Star Trek Voyager. But probably the most super awesome geek Latina actor out there today has got to be Zoe Saldana, and she is in an incredible 3 major geek franchises. Not only has she reprised the historic role of Uhura in the new alternate timeline Star Trek films, but she also is Neytiri in James Cameron's Avatar and Gamora in Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. So next year, we're going to see her in Star Trek Beyond, and then in 2017 in both Avatar 2 and the Guardians of the Galaxy sequel. And then undoubtedly, she is going to be in the projected Star Trek 4, which we're looking at coming out in 2019. So the geek universe is definitely full of a lot of people of Hispanic and Latino descent. And I think that's really something to celebrate when we look at Ricardo Montalban and this anniversary of his birth, and think about how difficult it was for him in the beginning of the film industry, and to see these incredibly successful, incredibly prolific actors out there working, as well as these great directors creating these films that we all love so much. And of course, please feel free to talk to us on Twitter or send us an email. Let us know who we left out, who your favorites are, any films we didn't mention that you thought we should have.
Geek Homeworld Review Preview.
We're talking now about the new, exciting Captain America Civil War trailer that just dropped. Captain America is coming out in May of 2016, and among the movies I'm looking for in 2016, this is definitely one I'm not going to miss. It basically will be Avengers 2.5. It's where everything that we've built up over time falls apart with all the heroes, especially Captain America and Iron Man. So we look at the trailer. It starts off with Bucky, the Winter Soldier, along with Falcon and Cap. And it's kind of throwback to the after credit scene from Ant-Man that came out previously. And Bucky's mechanical arm in this part of the trailer is in some kind of vice sort of thing, so he's restrained. And Cap is talking to him and trying to see if Bucky's okay, if he's out of that mind control that he's been under. You know, all the killings that he's done as the Winter Soldier against his will without realizing that he was being mind controlled and all that, and he forgot who he truly was, Bucky. You know, if you follow the whole Bucky Captain America storyline. So Cap is trying to see if Bucky's okay, and he's just seeing about that mind control component there. And they show this explosion at this building, and then Bucky says, "I don't do that anymore," and to that accusation of that destruction there. And Cap replies, "Well, the people that think you did are coming right now, and they are not planning on taking you alive." So he's basically trying to intervene. Cap's trying to intervene here. He's trying to help his old friend Bucky, who he's trying to rehabilitate. And there's a question, this little scene that we see here, did Hydra stage that destruction? Is a possibility. There's some talk out there about that, this particular destruction that Bucky is being blamed for. But you got to realize Cap isn't even put in this trailer in a good light, really, because Cap is defending his friend, and it's almost like he's putting his friendship and his belief, kind of like Superman, in the sense that, you know, anyone is truly redeemable if they're sorry for what they've done. You know, Cap is about walking a straight line as much as possible, about doing the right thing all the time. And is his judgment being clouded by his friendship with Bucky, and the Bucky that he knew that he thought was gone, who isn't gone? So anyway, the next scene we see is Colonel Thaddeus Ross, and he's walking into this room here. Could be, I don't know, maybe some kind of staging area or something. There's a little talk out there on the internet that maybe this is the beginning stages of Thaddeus Ross becoming the Red Hulk, which would be awesome. But this Thaddeus, from what I understand, is going to be different than the Thaddeus Ross we've seen before. I think he's going to be a lot more aggressive, a hell of a lot more meaner, you know, and more intent in getting done what he feels is the right thing to do. So you've got a lot of people doing what they feel is the right thing. The next part of the trailer, we see the new Avengers building, and Thaddeus Ross calls Cap a vigilante. And then I believe it's called Scurvia. The Scurvia Accord is shown next, and that was the city that was lifted in the air literally in Avengers Age of Ultron. And the Accord is for Superhuman Registration Act, basically. That's not the exact thing it says on there, but it's basically the Superhuman Registration Act. And Ross says the world can no longer tolerate this, basically talking about vigilantes, undocumented superheroes. And if you've read the comics, the storyline, you know that Spider-Man was involved. But when they were making this, I don't know that they necessarily had the rights to Spider-Man. So I looked real hard in the trailer, and I didn't see Spider-Man anywhere. So anyway, we have Black Widow pretty much begging Cap to, quote, stay out of this, concerning Bucky, and he's obviously not going to do that. Then Iron Man in the next shot enters and says to Cap, "You seem a little defensive." And the next scene out of that, we see Tony out of his armor, and he says, "Sometimes I want to punch you in your perfect teeth." And, of course, we see later on Tony's got, or earlier than that, so I think some of these are out of sequence on purpose in the trailer, but you see that black eye that Tony has. So some fight has ensued. Cap, the next scene, he jumps through a window and has a little fight there where he's fighting these guys off. Then we see the teams line up. Iron Man and War Machine versus Captain America, Bucky, the former Winter Soldier, Scarlet Witch, and Hawkeye. And then we see a little scene with Falcon. And then you see Captain America, and it looks like maybe he's going to be in a fight with Black Panther, who Black Panther is probably... And he looks awesome, by the way. This is the first time we've seen a full screenshot of him there on film. And, they went to Wakanda and all that, and where the vibranium came from for Cap's shield and all that, and Ultron. And so it's all, of course, tied together. They've been teasing Black Panther, Wakanda, and all that on the previous movies, and finally we get that. But is Black Panther neutral? Is Black Widow, for that fact, neutral? I think she's a little bit more on Cap's side and everything. Then we see this great scene where Bucky tries to rip the arc reactor using his mechanical arm right out of Iron Man's suit, which is awesome. And then the next scene is Iron Man lying next to War Machine, who's passed out with his faceplate off, and he is just out for the count. And Tony's got that oh man, you've crossed the line looking on his face. And then we get that brilliant line where Cap is talking to Tony, and he says, "I'm sorry, Tony, I wouldn't do this, but he's my friend," essentially is what he says. And then Tony goes, "So was I." And then you see the credits, Captain America Civil War, the trailer. Cannot wait for it. We'll be talking more about it here on Geek Homeworld.
Geek Homeworld Review Preview.
Cheryl is joining me as we have just come from the theater, fresh out of watching Victor Frankenstein. And Cheryl is our go-to expert on Frankenstein, so what are your thoughts?
Well, I have to say, I feel obligated to give my views on this movie because I talk so much about Frankenstein in episode 7 of the podcast, Franken Geek, which you can still catch, and was really looking forward to this film. So yes. I want to tell you the things that this film has in common with the original story, the almost 200-year-old science fiction horror novel from 1818, Frankenstein. It has exactly 2 things in common.
Uh-oh. 1,
there's a character named Victor Frankenstein.
Okay.
And 2, he creates a creature out of body parts.
End of story.
Then, in this particular retelling, reimagining, which some critics are saying lacks imagining of the story, we have a completely different time period, a completely different location. Mm-hmm. There is not a single character from the novel who's in the movie except for Victor Frankenstein.
From Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Even there is no Igor in the book. Igor is introduced later. This film has Igor. Fine. So you're building on previous interpretations of the film. But I have to apologize to 2 people.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to apologize to Kenneth Branagh because I've been mad at him for 112 years now about his interpretation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I'm still not happy he called it Mary Shelley's, but man, it's a whole lot closer than this film is. And I need to apologize to all of our listeners and everyone out there who, when you've read like Game of Thrones and you get upset because that's not what's happening in the HBO production, or you've read The Walking Dead and then they're not doing that in the television show and there are all these new characters, because I feel your pain.
Well,
because that's how I feel right now about this being called Victor Frankenstein. This could have been a story with a totally different character name, actually.
There is a few Lannisters that show up.
Yes, there are. You do see people from the Game of Thrones. You see people from Sherlock. You see people from Downton Abbey. So it has a really all-star cast.
Right.
And in fact, the 2 leads, James McAvoy and Daniel Radcliffe, of Harry Potter fame, of course, give, I think, brilliant performances.
I agree.
The acting in this film is truly inspiring. I mean, some critics are saying that McAvoy's done a good job and Daniel Radcliffe and the others less so, but I disagree. I really think that all of the performances
were strong.
Were very strong. I don't understand why Jessica Brown Findlay's character's there. You could take her out of the story entirely, and it wouldn't make a darn bit of difference. Yeah. But I guess they needed a chick.
Tyrone Lannister in there.
Tywin Lannister.
Excuse me.
Well, he gets one scene, but he was strong. He might as well have been Tywin Lannister. He was playing the same character. He really was. So he didn't die on the toilet. In that case, James McAvoy is playing Tyrion in this movie. Well, and I have to say that although the film is set a couple of generations later than Mary Shelley's novel, based on the costumes, it looks like it's 1860s, maybe 1870s. Right. But it really is a sort of more steampunk version of 19th century England, Victorian England. And because of that, it is a bit anachronistic. It reminds me of some of the Sherlock productions. And in fact, in some ways, this film is Sherlock Holmes meets Frankenstein. Because you have this crime detective thing going on. And for the good part of the movie, I kept asking you, Sherlock Holmes wasn't really in this timeline, well, for a minute, was he? You thought Victor Frankenstein was Sherlock Holmes. And so I think that the production also was pretty good. There were some issues with the CGIs and the green screens a little bit, but I thought the set design, the costume design was really good. I thought the cinematography was good. The cinematography is getting some hits. I did think that was creative, but it's a bit choppy in places. The build up to the final scene is long in coming. I liked the interaction between Daniel Radcliffe's Igor character and Victor Frankenstein. And there were references there to other versions of the story previous, including I saw references to Young Frankenstein and of course that's why I keep saying Frankenstein. The 1930s and 1940s Frankenstein series. The writing, however, was a little bit tortured. If it wasn't for the brilliant acting, I don't think the writing would have been any good at all. And maybe that owes a little bit to the editing, but the writing is weak. The screenplay by Max Landis, who is son of John Landis of American Werewolf fame, but Max Landis's most recent credit was American Ultra, which tanked in the late summer this year. So, and this film got pushed back. The original release date was supposed to be October of 2014. So it was pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And the most recent date announced... They should have kept pushing. It was going to go up against The Martian in October. And so they put it into Thanksgiving weekend here in the U.S. And first predictions, it's a $40 million budget. Early predictions were first weekend with this elongated weekend was going to be $6 to $8 million. After the first day, they revised that, cut it in half. Yeah, it's like $6 or $8. Which I guess was our tickets. Yeah. Thank God we went at the matinee. But I think it's getting a lot of flack from a lot of the different critics. It's getting thumbs down all over the place. But I think, although I'm a Frankenstein purist and I don't like some of the direction of the film and I don't understand Jessica Findlay's character, it's a good film. I think it's worth watching. Had I never read Frankenstein or ever heard... But no. I would have said, yes, this is a pretty good movie. And it was well acted. I thought the direction was well. The production was well. I mean, there were problems that we cited, but there were strong performances. Well, and they set it up for sequels, and please, no sequels. No sequels. Let it stand on its own. Yeah. And so, I mean, some let it be impaled and fall down dead. Some of the critics are saying, wait for it to come on television or catch it on Netflix. I don't know. I think that there is enough value in the special effects and the sound that you might want to see it in a theater. Right. But you don't have to. So at the end of the day, did you enjoy it? I enjoyed it, but it's not really a Frankenstein film. It's just like what you said earlier. There's only those two elements. But. Yeah, I would say if I wasn't such a Frankenstein freak, I wouldn't have been squirming in my seat the way I was. I enjoyed it. If you want to enjoy this movie, I suggest you listen to episode 7, Franken Geek. It's much more entertaining than Victor Frankenstein was. Brilliant performances. Yes. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Geek Homeworld podcast with your host, SavageTechman. You can find us on Libsyn, Google+, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, listen to us on iTunes, see us on YouTube, be part of our Mixler chats.
Thank you. See you again on the Geek Homeworld podcast.
Geek Homeworld.